All right, 9:19 the time, and a very good morning, everyone. Great to have you joining us. You're listening to the Eat, Drink, Explore Radio Network. I'm your host, Randall White, joined by the lovely and talented Patty Pyburn.
Good morning, everyone.
And if you were listening to the show, you know about the controversy surrounding California oysters going on up in the Bay Area. But it's not just a Bay Area story. This has taken on a national focus, primarily, I think, because the National Park Service, the Department of the Interior, is associated with this story. Mm-hmm. And so we thought it would be a great idea to have on the show the owner of Drakes Bay Oyster Company to go straight to the source and find out what is happening here. And so owner Kevin Lunny joins us right now with Drakes Bay Oyster Farm. And good morning, sir.
Good morning.
We appreciate having you on the show. I imagine you're hearing from media outlets constantly right about now.
Yes, it's been an interesting few days, I will say that.
Now, just to bring everyone up to speed, you had a 40-year contract with the Department of the Interior to raise oysters in Drakes Bay there, and that expires in 2013. And there was an option, the possibility that it could be extended by 10 years, but Ken Salazar, the Secretary of the Interior, decided not to go with the extension and has given you 3 months to shut down your operation. Is that right?
That is essentially correct, yes.
And were you surprised that when this decision was made, how the community would react?
Not really surprised. There has been just enormous support for the continuation of this historic resource throughout this 7-year ordeal where this whole issue has been discussed. And we felt that the Interior Department was clear on how Marin County and the Bay Area felt about, keeping this resource alive. So it was actually a big surprise that the decision was made this way.
You have some pretty heavy hitters on your side. U.S. Senator Dianne Feinstein, who is a very popular senator from the state of California, has weighed in on this issue. What is she saying?
Well, our hat's really off to Senator Feinstein because early on in the controversy, she was actually called in by the Marin County Board of Supervisors to look at this in detail, and she did. She had her staff really dig in and see what was actually happening, and she was outraged. She recognized that there was a campaign of false science and misrepresented facts by the Park Service. Now, that's not my words. Those are the words of the National Academy of Sciences and the Interior Inspector General.
Oh, mm-hmm.
And so she was outraged, so she stepped in to try to help correct some of these, falsehoods from the Park Service. So she's been a great voice.
And this was science that took place during the 7-year period you mentioned to see what your impact on the natural surroundings were, correct?
That's correct. There were some studies done before, and the issue was that the Park Service misrepresented the findings, and the studies actually show no serious effect at all, and the Park Service claimed that there were and cited those studies, and that's why this was, a concern.
Now, Kevin, I'm curious. We were saying earlier that you have filed a lawsuit. Obviously, your intent is to save your operation there. Now, do you see a way that both goals could be met? You could continue doing what you're doing. The Park Service could reach the goals. Is there a resolution here? Is there maybe a way that isn't being considered yet on how to make this work?
We've always felt there is. This is an example of a fantastic working landscape where we can have resource conservation and food production at the same time. And that's what Point Reyes National Seashore is. It was created out of these working landscapes, and the ranches that are all surrounding Drakes Estero, where the oysters live, it's all part of this experiment to see how well these uses can, coexist. And
you raise grass-fed cattle on the piece of property that you're talking about.
Yes, we're one of the ranches. I'm third generation there. I'm born and raised looking out over the estuary from our home. And we have certified organic grass-fed beef on the ranch.
I know the area well. I was born and raised in Novato, and we took, the traditional family Sunday drive.
Mm-hmm.
We would take Sunday drives out to Point Reyes National Seashore. Back then, I called it Point Reyes.
Point Reyes.
That's how the locals would say it back in the day.
That's right.
But Point Reyes is such a beautiful spot to go. And just a moment ago, you mentioned food production. If I have our facts and figures correct, an article I read in the San Francisco Chronicle said that your operation, the Drakes Bay Oyster Company, provides nearly 40% of California fresh oysters. Is that true?
That is what it does. It produces roughly, we'll call it a third and sometimes more of all the oysters grown in the state of California. And all that food stays in the San Francisco Bay Area. So it's really been part of our local, sustainable food supply for, generations.
And that's where that whole restaurant trend kicked off, where you
Right.
Source locally, and so it's not uncommon to see Drakes Bay oysters on the menu at a lot of top Bay
Any
Area
prediction
restaurants.
on what would happen if this all follows through what the Department of the Interior would like to see happen, which would be to close down the operation? Any prediction on what that does to supply and demand and prices of oysters?
There have been some estimates that this will really cause an increase in cost of oysters, but it's also their decision to remove the oyster farm has, enormous environmental consequences at the same time because we have such a seafood trade deficit already in this country. It means that we're going to be shipping more in from Asia.
Right. And
so in the Bay Area, instead of local oysters, it would be oysters maybe from Korea. And so their estimates are that we'll still have a demand for oysters in the Bay Area. We're just going to lose the sustainable local supply.
Now, and I'm curious, and this is something I'm totally uneducated on. Do oysters that come from other areas meet the same standards as our local? I mean, obviously they're coming from farther away, so that just inherently they're not as fresh. We know that. But do they meet the standards under which your oysters are produced?
No, they don't. We actually. And the other thing they don't do is they aren't meeting the same environmental standards.
Oh.
What we do is, in many ways, and even the National Academy of Sciences believes it actually enhances the health of the estuary because of their filter feeding and their habitat value and all the things that oysters do. That's why they're putting them in the Chesapeake Bay and in San Francisco Bay because they'd like to have something as healthy as Drakes Estero. So coming from abroad will have, certain environmental consequences as well.
Kevin, I saw a quote from the owner of Hog Island Oysters. He said that on any given day, he cannot meet the demand currently with your operation in full production, and that he just can't even imagine what it'll be like if you shut down.
No, actually, the other oyster farmers in California have all weighed in and saying, this is a travesty because we supply all those Tomales Bay growers so they can keep their production or their demand going and their supply because they can't produce enough, and we actually have water quality such that we can continue to harvest when Tomales Bay can't.
Hey, Kevin, we only have 1 minute left, and I want to address what about people who say, you knew you were getting into this, you had a 40-year lease, it's running out. What would you say to those people?
Oh, that's been an interesting argument. What we did our due diligence. We looked at the 40-year agreement, and it's explicitly renewable. There's a clause right in the contract. We talked about it with the Park Service before we took over and made sure that it could be renewed. It's never been considered non-renewable.
Well, we'll be following this closely. Kevin Lunny, owner of the Drakes Bay Oyster Company, we really appreciate you taking time out of your Sunday morning to join us.
Well, thank you.
9:28 the time. We're back in just a moment with a couple of Christmas gift ideas.
Can't wait to
for
hear
the
about that.
Foodies in your life. You're listening to the Eat, Drink, Explore Radio Network. You can always find our program information online, eatdrinkexplore.com.